I'm Kevin Rudd, and today I talked to Saya Kawan, who started 25 years ago with Cisco. Saya, you worked in various parts of the APJ region, Korea, Japan, Australia, and Singapore, and you've held both country-specific and regional leadership roles. Now, with more than 2 decades of experience in the industry, you are Vice President of Customer Experience in Cisco. You are very welcome. So, what sort of services do you provide to your customers? And what is customer experience in your definition?
Kevin, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation with you. And hopefully I can share my experiences with you and the viewers of this video.
Pleasure.
Customer experience to us is all about services, and it's about the life cycle approach on services. We believe that in the past we used to say there's implementation services, there was technical services, but now we're taking a much more of a life cycle approach right from the point where the customer purchases our solution, and then we make sure that our solution is aligned to what the business requirements of the customers are, and we take that through the life cycle of implementation, and then onboarding and adoption as well, because that's also important, because once you deploy the technology, customers, whether it's internal use or their customers use, they need to it needs to be used, right? Otherwise it just becomes a box that sits on the shelf that doesn't get used, right? So it needs to get used, and then we want to take them through to the renewals and make sure that they are using it enough so that they will continue to renew with us. So that's the life cycle approach that we are looking to take, and through that life cycle we want to make sure that our customers are getting the best experience that they can get in the industry. That's why we call ourselves customer experience. We changed the name from Cisco Services to Customer Experience about 2 years ago.
Right. And how do you engage and measure this experience for the customers? When you do service, you provide services, and as you said, it's a life cycle. It's not only selling a product, it's from onboarding to the retirement of that service and renewal. How do you practically, beyond, for example, surveys and questionnaires?
Yeah, I think we definitely use the surveys as well, NPS and also transactional satisfaction surveys. Those always give us good indication of where the customers are and how they feel. But some of the other measures that we look at, and there's many different ways of measuring customers, but the way they consume the solution is also a really good measure, because if we sell them, for example, a collaboration solution, and their users are not taking this up, they're using an alternate solution and not using our solution, that means there's something wrong with it, whether it's the technology that's not working, or it's too difficult for the users to use. There may be some reasons for that, but they're not getting a good experience. So adoption is a good measure. Renewal rate is also another good measure as well. Obviously, if they're not having a good experience, they're not going to want to renew. They're going to jump to a competitor. Right, so those are some of the other measures, and also quarterly business reviews are also a really good way to have a frank discussion with the customer, whether we're meeting their requirements and what sort of experiences that they're having with us. And often in those QBRs, they give us really direct feedback. Sometimes it hurts, and we have to go back and really do some soul searching and fix do some major fixes. But it's really useful for us in making sure that we continue to gauge the experience that the customers are having with us, and enables us to continue to give that great experience that we strive to give.
Yes. What type of customers do you have most?
Our customers are mainly business, so and they're broken up into service provider, enterprise customers, small and medium price customers, small and medium-sized customers, and also public sector customers as well. So all the businesses that you can think of are potential customers. And consumers are mainly our customers' customers. For example, service providers would have consumers as their customers. So consumers will be using our equipment, but sometimes they wouldn't know that they're using it, but they'll be a customer of service providers, as an example.
Okay, so for these customers, which are mainly businesses, what type of services do you provide? If you classify to customer service, like ticketing and managing cases and so on, versus customer self-service, if you enable them, they kind of self-service themselves, or field service, if you need to send someone. Do you cover the whole range of service management?
Yeah, we cover the whole range actually, and probably beyond what you've just described as well, because we, like I said in the beginning, we cover the life cycle. So we start from the design phase. So when the customer first purchases our solution and we design, we help them. So we provide design and implementation services, which is also really, really important, because if you get the design right up front, what happens as the customers start using it, it becomes much more smoother, right? So we provide that service. And then in the middle, after design and implementation is done, we also provide what we call customer success. And it's becoming a bigger, much more known term in the software industry. That's where we do the onboarding and adoption services. So we, after from a technical perspective, all the solution is deployed, we sit down with the customer and put together what we call a success plan, and say, okay, who are the people that need to use this, or how would you want to adopt this? And then we talk about how do we get around to doing that. And that adoption plan, or the success plan, is not just about technology, it's about people, because we need to make sure that we understand who the users are, and users have different personas, and different personas have different requirements. So we need to understand that, and have, whether it's training or change management, customized to those different personas, and then we help them to go through the adoption. So that customer success service is also a key component of what we do. And then when it goes what we call the day two services, so we have the basic technical support services, 24/7 support over the phone, online, and we also have self-service as well for the customers, because we have a lot of intellectual property that we've built up over the last few decades that the customer can tap into. And we have the field services where if a customer needs to change hardware, we can send field engineers and parts out there and change it for them, those type of services. And then if we go one level above the basic services, we have what we call expert care, where we have dedicated engineers and operations managers that would help to fix issues faster when the problem occurs. And it's a real value that a lot of our customers love, because when an engineer and an operation manager understands the customer environment, the troubleshooting becomes so much faster. I used to be a technical support engineer long time back, and one of the most times that you spend when you troubleshooting is trying to understand the customer's environment. What is the environment look like? Who are the users? And so if you have a dedicated engineer that knows that already, then you can really jump to the solution much faster. So that's the next level. And then the level above there is where we start to use automation and AI, and then bring actionable insights together, right? Bring all those things together and say to our customers, hey, we can now start to tell whether you might be having a problem soon. So we can help them to prevent issues by predicting different events that we see. So through all the data that we've collected, we can start to see certain signatures. We call it digital signatures that lead to certain outages, right? So we can say, hey, Mr. Customer, you need to take this action, or otherwise you're going to have these outages in the future. So those are some of the preventable issues. And ultimately, what we're going to, what we're thinking about, what we're working towards is more of that self-healing as well. So the customer doesn't even know that they had the issue or that their potential issue and it was just fixed, right? So that's I think the ultimate of services that we need to get to.
Well, thank you. It was interesting discussion in here. I would like to go back to a few of these things and elaborate a little, please, about customer success and onboarding and adoption that you mentioned. Well, system implementation is a package. Many things need to work here and there to guarantee successful implementation of a system, where there's going to be cultural things, habits, processes, data, wastes, systems, and so on. And as you said, people side of that, it's an overarching umbrella of everything, because everywhere you're talking and interacting with people. How do you practically consider this factor?
We put a much more priority on that, on the people side of things now, because in the past we were, literally just selling technology, and basically in the middle, that the customer success part, I used to describe it as we sell the solution and help them to deploy it, and then we hope and pray that the customers will use it well, right? But now we, especially because we're moving more towards software and subscription in Cisco, so we're starting to understand that we need to be there with them. We can't just hope and pray. We need to be there with them and help them to onboard and start to adopt, and so that people side of things become much more important. So we have various groups of engineers, technical people within Cisco, but the newest group is, within the customer success, we call them customer success specialists. And these are very technical people, but their whole purpose is to really understand not only just understand the technology, but really understand how the people would use it and how do we make it better and easier for the people to use it. So there's a whole new focus on people side of things, because that's so important, people and processes. Yeah.
Do you train these guys, this team, with other non-technical aspects of relationship? Yeah,
customer success is a fairly new area for us, but I think it's been practiced more in this purely software companies like Salesforce.com and so forth, and we're definitely taking the learnings from the industry leaders in this area. But yes, definitely there are trainings that we have for them. So there's obviously technical trainings, but there are other trainings that we run for our customer success teams. And we have them do green belt, blue belt, and up to the black belt training, so that they skill up. Yeah, definitely it's a required training. Yeah.
Great. And as a part of this, and what you mentioned about relationship, and when technicians and your team know the customer environment, things are resolved much better and easier. Nowadays, there are dispatching tools, there are software systems to optimize, for example, who goes where based on the locations and skills and so on. Automated assignment of jobs to technicians, for example. How these things can come together. One side is the AI and algorithms and technology deciding who does what, optimum roster, if you like. And the other side, there are customers who would prefer the same technician, and they have relationships and so on. And if you use purely technical solutions, they may not get the same person next time. How do you see this?
Yeah. I think it's a really good question, and I can see these two areas, the human side of things and then the really digitized system coexisting and working together, as long as you find the right balance. And also, it is something that's needed to make sure that we can deliver our services to our customers in a very cost-effective and consistent, with a consistently high quality service, right? Because if you can automate the consistency of services would be really good, right? But you're right. We're all humans, and people like to talk to people. People like to talk to people that they're familiar with, that they have built a rapport and trust with, right? So that's where our technical consultants that we have can play a key role. But they don't need to do everything themselves, right? There's going to be a lot of work that need to be a lot of I wouldn't call it menial work, but work that can be automated, that we should automate using the tools and AI and so forth. And then this technical consultant who sort of oversees the different solutions coming together for that customer starts to build that relationship with the customer, so that the customer has someone that they can trust, or a team that they can trust, and then that team works with the automation so that they can do more with less, but provide better value to the customer. So I think it's finding the right balance between the people and the tools. But people sort of things are so important that it can't be just ignored 100%. So I think it's a great question. It's something that we need to do more work on and develop that the balance more as well as we go. Not only us, but I think everyone in the services industry.
Okay, so to include these aspects and also deliver what you mentioned as a life cycle of service in your organization, customer experience, you need some tools, software for your internal processes. Some of them you may develop yourself or use locally, and some there are international technology providers, say SAP, Salesforce, Microsoft, Oracle, the rest. And if you are about to choose a service management solution, what are the main criteria for you in selection process? So there are many technology providers in the market, and more or less all of them claim to do it all, from customer self-service, from interaction management, from field service mobility, scheduling, dispatching, and all of that reporting and kind of connected solutions and so on. There are many players in the market. What are the main criteria if you want to decide?
I think the main criteria that I would use is what our customers expect of us, right? So, a couple of things. First is obviously it has to be well tested solution, right? I don't want to be the guinea pig. It has to be a well tested solution that we roll out, and also I do want the provider to make sure that they not only just throw me the technology, but also sit down with us and help us to use it as well. That customer success motion back to us will be really important, because you can have the best tools, but if people are not using it, it's useless, right? So we need to have a really strong plan around that. And then the third piece would be, are they in it for the long run? Because we're in it for the long run. We don't want someone who's going to come in and provide us with the best solution, and then 2 years later they don't exist, right? Or they're not able to support us, because when we buy a solution, we're in it for the long run in terms of how do we continue to develop that, and we want someone who can be a partner to us with that solution.
Yeah, long run partner. That's a good topic in here. Perfect. Thank you. And obviously, when you want to implement such systems, you talk to consultant companies as well, to come and do the implementation, advise on the process change, and work together to do this implementation and change. And if you look at the consultant companies, big international, locals, and small ones as well, what are your main criteria to choose a consultant company?
Well, similar criteria as before, but I think for a consulting company, I think one of the things would be that they should be vendor and technology agnostic. That's going to be really important, because I want them to come up with the best solution for us, and not be tied to one or other solution. I think that's going to be important. Also, the consultant that has a strong industry experience, right? not just people that have nice PowerPoints and theory, but someone, with people that have industry experience, so they understand what we, what our pain points are. Of course, we can share, we will share our pain points, but having consultants that have lived through that in the past, I think is also important, because then they would really know what we're working, what conditions we're working under, or what we're working against, or what problem we're trying to solve. So I think those things will be important. And so again, I think the consultant would need to be someone that stays for the longer term for us, because we don't want to get their recommendation and pay them the big bucks and they go away and we're stuck with ugly baby that we don't know what to do with.
So what I'm hearing is that the cost and price of implementation is not the only factor you would consider. You might perhaps go, for example, with a more expensive implementation consultant, however, with the criteria that you mentioned are met.
Absolutely. I don't think these days you can afford to just go for the cheapest solution. I think that's not the right way to go, especially when you're responsible for a very large budget or very large business. I think you have to go for. Of course, you're not going to go and spend money everywhere without thinking about it, but you want to make sure that you get a good quality solution, and good quality solution and services. You got to pay the dollars for that as well, right? So it's a balance, that you have to strike. But I wouldn't definitely just go for price, because when you do that, I've done that a few times, with my personal purchases, and you always regret it. You have to go back and buy another thing, and now you're paying double anyway.
Exactly. Do you see Uberization in service as a concept to ramp up and being one of the main strategies in the future?
I do, because I thought about Uberization probably many years ago. But some of the challenge, and if we can get to that, and if we can resolve some of the challenges that I thought about, it could be a good way, for the service industry to be evolving. One of the biggest challenge is quality control, because we have a responsibility to our paying customers to provide a consistently high level of services. When you, I think Uber in the ride sharing business has done that well, but for us it's not as easy to do, because the skill sets that are needed in our industry are very highly technical skills, and to make sure that the quality of service is controlled and consistent is going to be a big challenge. I think that's one of the biggest ones. But having said that, we have tried to do some of that. It's not a full Uberization, because the way we did it is we created what we call communities. So we invited engineers from our customers, our partners, with certain level of certifications to be part of the community and start to answer each other's questions. Right. So I think that's the start of or something that can lead to Uberization. But there are some technical challenges that we need to get over. And then, but to me, the biggest one is how do you get over that quality control, especially when you're running a global services business. I think that's going to be probably the biggest challenge that we would need to resolve. That's why we have, if we look at our services team, it consists of our regular employees as well as employees from our partners. But we haven't gone full Uberization in service delivery just yet.
Related to this question, do you see an aging workforce happening to your workforce, especially internal ones? And do you think contractors, and then beyond that, this Uberized workforce or crowd workforce is going to help in that situation?
I think so, because at the moment our industry is faced with talent war. It's really hard to go out there and find people with the right skills and right experience. Right, so we're looking at many different strategies of how do we continue to develop more skills, more talent. We're doing graduate programs. We're setting up, Cisco network academies all around the world to train people up. We're also looking at, going to schools, going to high schools and trying to see how do we get more females to join the industry as well, because that's where, in the STEM industry, there's predominantly male-dominated industry, right? So, which means we're only tapping into half of the population, right? So, doing that. In the US, we have programs where we go out and talk to the veterans, people that have come out of military, that they need to be retrained. And similarly, I think the aging workforce, we need to tap into as well. And it's all about, how do we, who do we partner with? What training programs do we give? And how do we leverage them? And it could be whether we hire them or our partner companies hire them, or if there is a Uberized model available, that they could use that as well. But definitely, aging workforce is something that we would need to address and help them to reskill and retrain, because there is definitely a lack of skills out there currently.
Okay, thank you. In the past few months, we have been in lockdown, and you know about this pandemic. I have two questions about that. Firstly, is about your support and workforce field service team. How has it been impacted, and what have you done with that? I would imagine that you're naturally providing remote services anyway, but has it impacted the remote troubleshooting as well?
So luckily, we've been able to deliver most of our services remotely and virtually, and we have the tools, we have the connectivity. Our customers have that through our solution as well. So most parts, yes, we were able to do that. There were parts where you actually have to go and physically swap out hardware and things like that. That needs to be done on site, and so. Some of our people in different countries were classified as essential workers, and they had the special permits to be able to travel around, special permit from the government to travel around and do those type of work. So that's how we got around those type of work that needed to be done on site. But a lot of the work which was being done on site, but that could be done remotely, we've moved it to remote. And in the past, we couldn't take it remote because, as we talked about it a few questions ago, people are people, and they like to sit down with people in a room, whiteboard, discuss, troubleshoot, and work out a solution. And, we wanted to meet our customers' requirements. So even though you could have that discussion like we're doing now, we sent them to customers' office, and they had those meetings and discussions and so forth. But those things now, even the customers understand can't be done. So we were able to move a lot of that remotely and do that virtually. And I think that, the positive of this is, yes, we're not going to be completely replacing the human interaction, but I think we're going to be able to provide a much more cost-effective way of delivering service to our customers by doing more virtual. And the customers are now used to that as well. In the past, they weren't used to it. So they say, you have to be in my office, right? And then the other positive is now we can have experts from all around the world available to our customers, because we can now connect them remotely. Where if we had to send people on site and do that in the customer's office, we didn't always have that flexibility, because we can't fly people everywhere, right? Although we've been flying a lot of people around the world, but you can't do that all the time. But now with that virtual engagement, that has opened the door to many, many more subject matter experts from all around the world to our customers, which is a real positive for us.
Are you using any specific remote assistance and troubleshooting, video sharing, augmented reality?
Yeah, we have our own solution. It's called Cisco WebEx. And we sell that to our customers as well. And that's been a big hit for business customers because we have the security features as well. But we've been using a lot of that, and that's what enabled us to move. I think over 70,000 employees in Cisco virtually overnight, move them to working remotely and not missing a beat. Right, so and that's been working really well for us, and lucky we had that. If we didn't have that, and it would have been a real challenge. But we were using that even before. A lot of our calls were international. We were doing video conference calls, whiteboarding, in a call like this. So we were also, as people, we were used to this tool as well. So it was easy transition for the whole company to make. But I did notice that some of the companies, they had to do some training and change management to get the people on board, people that were so used to just working face to face in the same office.
Yes, thank you. During the situation that we are in, many companies are holding up on the capex spend. We are in a kind of an indecision period, and obviously it's going to, or it has impacted your businesses and your customers as well. On the services side and on the servitized model of the products, servitization is now being more than before looked at. Do you see this servitization model, subscription, transaction, usage-based type of billing, rather than owning a piece of software or owning a piece of equipment or asset, is going to be a solution for this situation of indecision?
I think so. I think the technology industry was already moving in that direction before. So there were at least two major movements that was happening. One was digital transformation, where all of our business customers would be thinking about how do they use technology to improve their competitiveness in their business, right? So that digital transformation was happening. And then the second one was the transformation, rather than investing upfront early on, owning everything, moving to more of a subscription model. That was also happening as well. So, but the COVID-19 pandemic, I think, has accelerated these two transformations much faster. So something that probably would have taken 5 to 10 years now is going to happen in 6, 12, 18 months. All the customers are thinking about how do they do that. But it comes back to when do they have certainty to be able to open up their purses and start to make that investment. But we are seeing a lot of excitement and exciting discussions happening, because customers know that this is what they need to have very agile and resilient system, because this probably won't be the last pandemic that we'll see, around the world. And our customers are thinking about how could they be resilient, how could they build resilient systems, how could they build secure systems to be ready for future situations like this, should it occur.
Yeah, thank you. This resilience is an interesting topic. I believe service management started maybe a few decades ago, but predominantly in the last 2 decades, we have seen 2 waves of things. The first one being the mobile and computerized and connected world of service. And in the past few years, especially, it was about optimization and using AI and predictive and so on and so forth. Now, accelerated by COVID-19, resilient service management being a topic of discussion. Now, in your opinion, how can you classify factors that are important to provide a resilient service to your customers?
Resiliency needs to include security as well, because when you're moving from a very much an on-prem business to remote working business, it's much easier for hackers to come in and do things to you. So security is a key part of that resiliency. So security is probably the number one thing that everyone should be thinking about. And we're seeing a lot of interest in how to build more secure environments around our business customers. Resiliency also is about the systems resiliency as well. How stable and if should something happen in one part of their system, how does the other part come to cover that. So redundancy is also a really, really important one. That's the word, redundancy. So make sure that there is no single point of failure, but there's redundancy everywhere. Is also going to be really important. And then I think the process, because we can't ignore people and process in this as well, because sometimes people can be the weakest link too. You can have the most resilient and secure system, but if you have a person that doesn't know how to be secure or how to act in a secure way, it could be that way right? So making sure that we have the security training, resiliency training for our people, and then having the processes that everyone needs to follow. I think those are some of the things that we would need to be considering to build resilience. So it's not just about technology. So in technology, there's security and the redundancy, but I think the process and the people side of things have to be a big part of the overall resiliency.
What about your supply chain? To provide services, you need spare parts and so on and so forth, and you have a supply chain that may be interrupted by any pandemic or any other disruptions. How do you think resilience service management can actually dictate some new processes in your supply chain?
I think we have to definitely diversify, where the sources of supply chain is, and how they route through the delivery and things like that. Diversification, multi-vendor, I think is going to be key. Those things have to be there because, again, we don't want to have a single point of failure. We want to make sure that there's redundancy built into that. And that's so important for us, because having that resilient supply chain, because that allows our customers to be resilient. The customers are dependent on that. So we do put a lot of focus in making sure that our supply chain is resilient and it won't fall apart. And until now, whether through many different natural disasters and crises that we had over the past couple of decades, we've been able to work through a lot of that without failure. Yeah. I think one thing I can talk about is when I was working in Japan, there was a big earthquake in Japan, and then the tsunami came in and it destroyed a lot of big part of Japan. And even then, I remember we were working with the government to work out, okay, how do we get our supply chain into places where they weren't allowing any civilians into, right? So those things, and we built processes around how do we engage with government, how to engage with local officials to make sure that we can deliver and have that robust and resilient supply chain. And that's so important, so that customers can rely on us. And the customers, I even now talk about that and say, hey, because of that, we trust you now. Let's go. So
yes, interesting.
It's very, very important for the customer and important for us.
Very interesting. Thank you. So what has not changed? What has not changed since 25 years ago in the customer management, customer experience?
Yeah. One of the things that we've really focused on is people. That you talk about technical support, and some people use the term call center, and when you use the term call center, you think of people that are just repeating procedures, written procedures, repeating back to the customer.
That's right.
Yeah, we've always tried to stay away from that and make sure that our technical support engineers or people that are doing that are not a call center, but people that could talk to customers that could make decisions, that were empowered to make decisions that was best in the best interest of the customer, supported by the tools, the best tools and best automation, best analytics, so they can make the best decisions. So that focus on people was there when I started in 1996, and we still try to have that. Even Cisco's financially is ending this week and starting next week, right? So we were doing next year's financial planning, and even in that, our first focus area is people, and then we have other focus areas, right? So for us, especially in customer experience, in services, people are the most important asset, and that focus has never changed. And we also always want to have people that are innovative, that could make decisions, and that are empowered to make decisions, supported by great training and the best tools.
It's interesting because when we talk to customers, we deal with two types of people mainly, from IT and also from service, because we are talking to customers about their service management processes and so on. And in many situations, not all of course, the discussion becomes a technical discussion. All of a sudden we are talking about a software replacement rather than improving your service processes as well as software. And this people side of the thing sometimes is underestimated. What is your recommendations?
I think you're absolutely right. I think we do underestimate people side of things. We do, because I like to compare our technology to Legos, right? You can, with Legos, you can, these days I see Legos, they build fantastic things out of Legos, right? And someone has to do that. There's got to be someone that puts that together and create that fantastic piece out of that Lego, all the thousands of Lego pieces, right? Technology is like those Lego pieces. They're not, you can't just throw it out there and expect it to come together to be a fantastic masterpiece of whatever, right? I think technology is like that. That's where the people come in. People come in right from the design stage, making sure that these come together in a logical way to meet the business requirements, and then deployed in the right way. And then thinking about how is this technology going to serve the people, to make it easier for the people to do their jobs, or easier for the customers to engage with them. That's a huge part of that. Otherwise, technology just becomes an empty tin, basically. We do have a tendency to be really just thinking about, what's the latest technology? Wow, that's so cool. But we can never forget about how and who's going to be using that, and think about, what benefit is that going to bring. Otherwise, it just becomes a cool thing, but nothing else. Right?
I liked it. Legos, technology as a Lego. I take this as a takeaway from myself. Thank you. So now,
because one of the other things that I should add is, I think as technology advances, the world is becoming much more convenient. The banks are providing us with much better service through technology. And everyone's doing that in all the different industries. But on the surface, it looks so convenient and so easy to use. You have a great experience, but below the surface, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, right, to bring that together. And the analogy I used for that one was duck swimming on water, right? Duck's feet under the water that you can't see is like waddling really, rapidly, right? But on the surface, the duck looks so gracious, just gliding on the water, right? Technology, I think, is like that, where there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the services by people to make it possible to bring it together and make that experience on the surface much better than before. But we can't ignore what happens down below.
Fantastic. We are in 2020 now. How do you see service management in the next decade? if we come back in 2030, what are the main topics and areas of systems as well as processes and business models that you would see have changed during this decade?
Definitely automation, AI. That's going to be playing a much bigger role in the next decade. And I think I mentioned it earlier, but where we start to go into the self-healing environment, where wherever possible, I think that's also going to be a really important development that will happen in the services side of things. But then there are things that won't and can't change. One is the people that I talked about, people focus, and then focusing on customers. At the end of the day, service industry is all about customers, right? Making sure that we're listening to them, making sure that we're meeting their requirements. We can't go out and build fantastic services that's not going to meet the customer's requirements. So I think those two, people and customers, are not going to change. They haven't changed in the past. They're not going to change the focus on those two. But technology, I think, AI, automation, self-healing, those type of things will become much bigger part of the services.
And to support your organization in the next decade to move toward this, for example, what is it that you feel at the moment is missing from the technology point of view? I mean, service management technology, software, for example, and solutions that is missing, and you would like to highlight this as gaps for technology providers like SAP and Salesforce and Microsoft and others.
I think when we talk about a solution these days, it's one solution has multiple vendors and many different components in there. I think that's probably the hardest part for not just me, but anyone who's a consumer of a large solution. And if everyone can just think about not only their product, but think about how it fits in with everyone else and can provide that holistic picture. I think maybe it's a job of service integrators, or solution integrators. But whoever can provide that holistic view, how things will come together end to end, will probably be the winner. Whether you're a solution provider or a solution integrator or technology provider, I think to be able to bring that holistic picture is going to be the key thing, because technology is becoming more and more complex. It has become much more complex over the past few decades, and next decade, who knows how much more it's going to get complex. So, who can bring that holistic view to the customer and say, hey, Mr. Customer, this is how everything fits together, and this is the value that you're going to get out of this. I think whoever can do that and articulate that in the simplest way that the customers can understand will be the winner.
Interesting. Thank you very much. So you've been very informative, and it was a pleasure talking to you. And I would like to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Kevin. I really enjoyed the conversation today. I hope it helps.